welcome to Magicbricks. Now, this is India's first property channel. You're watching the Urban Debate. I'm Freda Souza. Thank you for tuning in. We're going to keep our focus on the real estate regulator. Now, remember, as home buyers and investors, you and I had a lot of homework to do and a lot of risk that we took on when we bought a home, especially if it was under construction. When the real estate regulator does come in, a lot of that risk will be passed on to the developer. The question we should be asking is, should we buy now or should we wait until the regulator comes in before we buy homes? We're also going to try and decode the regulator to understand what it means for the industry. And as a result, what does it mean for you and me as consumers? A lot of consultants believe that the real estate bill will add clarity and transparency to the market. The industry obviously assumes that the bill and all of the regulation that it will bring in will add to the pricing of homes and effectively take up the prices of homes. We're going to try and decode all of that on this show, as we continually do on this channel. Joining me on the show this evening, Anuj Puri, Chairman, Country Head, India at JLL. Sudeep Malik is a partner at Ketan & Company. Ashish Raheja, Managing Director, Raheja Universal. Rohit Gera, Managing Director, Gera Developers. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining me on this show. Anuj, I will start with you. Obviously, there was a paper released by your company on the research that you've done on the bill specifically. What I found very interesting is the fact that you believe it will increase our rating in your transparency index. What is the transparency index, and by how much do you think our transparency will improve?
So it's a very good point, Faye, and I think that is one of the biggest benefits that the sector is going to get with the real estate regulator coming in. Just like any other regulator when they came in, whether it was the telecom or the insurance or in the financial sector, we saw that there was an improved transparency that came in. With improved transparency, you have two or three things. You have more international institutional investors that start to come into the sector. But your cost of capital goes down.
Allow me to interrupt you. When you say improved transparency, obviously there's a time lag before that happens. There's some confusion with every regulator we've seen in this country. A year or two of confusion, adjusting both from the industry and the regulator. There's a learning curve. How long before that transparency actually shows up on the ground?
So it'll happen here as well. I can tell you absolutely it'll happen here as well. Just like with any other regulator, there's going to be interpretation of various clauses. We will need to see how the states adopt the Real Estate Regulation Act, how the interpretation of the various clauses are. Some of the clauses are not as clear-cut, and they have been left up to interpretation. I think it's about 18 months that you're going to see that there will be that fuzziness that's going to be created. But on the other side of that 18 months, we're going to see more maturity, more transparency, more capital, more developers, institutional developers who are not coming in and playing the game, more retail investors who are very scared, just like your opening statement, that people are reluctant to get into the real estate sector, wanting to come in and now play. And I am hoping is that will bring down the cost of capital, because there is a much more lesser risk that has been incorporated on the other side.
Right. Ashish Raheja, more transparency, possibly more investment, but also higher prices. Where do you stand on the bill and the regulator?
Well, regulator and market dynamics plus market perception don't always work hand in hand. I think in the short term, there will be no impact on prices. In the long term, yes, transparency will be good. On the one hand, post the 18-month, 24-month window which Anuj mentioned about, we will have hopefully lower cost of funding, because automatically the risk associated not just from the customer side, but the risk associated from the buyer side, from the lender side also goes down. So theoretically, our cost should go down. But practically, there's going to be a massive compliance set. It's not just laws which should be complied with, or the 70% escrow. There's a massive set of compliance. Our overhead will go up. Our delay in launching a project will go up. There'll be a different avenue of customer or consumer litigation. Yes, most consumer, they have good apples and bad apples in real estate. Developers, even consumers, you have some bad apples who will hold the developer to ransom using certain draconian clauses. So we don't know how it's going to play out, but we do see ourselves reducing the scale of our launches. So conversely, there will be a reduction in our annual supply. Of course, that supply, today we have 4 million coming up, but we don't know what will be delivered. We will launch only 1 million, but that will be delivered. So, but there will be less supply, and logically, there should be an impact. The prices will move upwards as that cost of holding, cost of interest is passed on to the customer. However, think of that as insurance premium.
Think of that as insurance payment. That's true. Rohit Gera, we've had this conversation in the past as well, where there will be an added risk that the developer will take on, and obviously that comes as a cost. But right now, and my argument to it is this: when I as a customer go out and buy something under construction, and I know there are a lot of the viewers in the NCR will identify with this, if I'm expecting to move into my home in 4 years, but it actually takes 6 or 8, sometimes 10. There's a loss of opportunity on the money. I've lost out on several things, then there's a cost associated with that as well. So from my point of view as a consumer, it's a fair ask if I'm going to have to pay a little bit more for the insurance of getting that home on time. We seem to have a problem with the audio with Rohit, but Anuj, the other point of added cost will be market forces, like Ashish rightfully mentioned, right? So how much room, I mean, we know the kind of market we're in right now. It's definitely not a seller's market. How much room do you think this market will allow developers to increase the prices, even if they're feeling the heat on the other end? Can they really pass it on?
It's a very good question, and I'll answer it in 2 ways, Faye. One is that your cost certainly will go up. As Ashish said, is that the cost of doing business, whether that is getting in the title insurance, whether that is increased compliance, or whether that is exactly the point that he was saying, is that I'm not going to be able to launch my projects prior to the approval, and it is going to be post-approval, which means that there has to be funding, there has to be some kind of a debt, there has to be some cost of capital. All that will be added onto the cost. That's one side. Your other point is important, is what is the market going to be able to pay? Ultimately, you can add up all that cost. But if the market is not going to be ready to pay that, that is what the price is.
The honest truth is that right now, customers are not coming to the table even at these prices.
Yeah, but having said that, Faye, if you just bear with me,
yes.
In a city like Bombay, there is a fair amount of unsold inventory under construction. But when you look at the inventory that is completed and unsold, it's less than 2%. Which means is that the buyer is happy to pay you a premium as long as you take away the risk.
Okay, may I rebut, Anuj? The regulator will regulate specifically under construction. There isn't, if once I get my OC, I'm no longer regulated. So just to help our viewers understand this, it doesn't matter what stage of construction the project is at when the regulator comes into force. Anything that does not have an OC, and I'm assuming that will include buildings that have been occupied for the last 10 years without an occupation certificate, everything that doesn't have an OC comes under the regulator. So your argument that ready to occupy commands a premium will continue because it's not going to be regulated, so there should not be any impact on those prices.
Yeah, but they will be. I was just taking that analogy and say is that if you are paying between 15 to 25% premium on completed, and you are still willing to buy as a buyer compared to under construction, why would you not pay the premium if you're taking away the risk due to RERA coming in? So in my opinion, the buyers will be willing to pay a premium because you're taking away the risk. Now what that premium is, I don't know, but certainly today on completed assets, they're paying between 15 to 25% because you're taking away the risk. Your other point is that under construction, retrospectively coming into RERA, I think there is going to be some confusion on that. I have no clarity how the ongoing projects which do not have completion certificate are now going to be in RERA. What is the impact that is going to happen to the developers, to the prospective buyers who bought it? I don't know.
Okay. Rohit Gera, I apologize for that glitch in our technology where we didn't have your audio a little while ago. We were talking about the added price that you believe is going to come in once the regulator comes in. And my argument is this: when buildings are not delivered on time, I'm already paying an added price. And this just gives me an insurance, like Ashish rightfully pointed out.
Look, Faye, I think currently as far as the customer is concerned, you talk to anybody who's buying an apartment and he tells you, the developer saying 2 years, any friend, any well-wisher will say, oh, you count 3. Okay? There is an invisible cost and there is a visible cost. The visible cost is what's put on the agreement today. The invisible cost, which is being borne by every home buyer, is the invisible cost of quality, is the invisible cost of risk of title, is the invisible cost of delay and therefore your extra EMIs as well as rent that you have to pay. What the government has effectively done with RERA is to say, all those risks which the customer is currently bearing the risk and the cost for it, all those risks are no longer borne by the customer but they're to be borne by the developer. Now that gives you additional protection, and anytime you need additional protection for anything, any additional insurance cover that you want, you have to pay more of an insurance premium for it. So it's pretty much the same thing. Somebody is bearing the risk and whoever's bearing the risk has to therefore bear the cost of that risk. And it's a simple thing as that. The other aspect is that there are tremendous cost increases as far as the developer is concerned. The single biggest one is impact on cash flows when it comes down to pre-launch. Pre-launch has been a way of developers funding their projects over the years. Over the last, I think, 10 to 12 years, this came into vogue. And as a result, land prices shot up. People were borrowing money at very high rates. All that's going to go out the window. So your capital requirement is going to go up. Your IRR is going to go down. And therefore, return expectations have to be, will get affected accordingly.
Right. Sudeep, tell me this. There is a lot of grey areas that blanks that need to be filled into the bill when we actually look at the wordings. Do you believe that this will be the state-specific regulators who will be given a little bit of room to sort of make the bill suit each particular state?
To a certain extent, yes, and but just because I want to add to the previous discussion a little bit. As Mr. Gera has pointed out, rightly, I'll give you a classic example in terms of insurance. If you see, title insurance the developer has to bear, so there is a premium, actual premium that is to be paid.
Yes.
The developer is not relieved of his obligation, and there is no limitation on title that will be, and he will be there will be a continuing liability on the developer as regards the title of the land is concerned. So all this will come at a cost.
Yes, there's also a 5-year warranty, which is
increased from 3 to 5. Generally in MOFA it was 3, and now there is a 5-year warranty period. So there will be an additional cost. Everything will be added to the cost.
And the escrow account. Have you done some calculations in the back of an envelope that tells us what the escrow account will wind up costing developers at this point?
Not really, but I must tell you that there was a suspicion, or there was a doubt in the mind of all and sundry that that 70% could not be used for the land. But if you see the developer while doing the registration will be entitled to declare encumbrance. And after
you have to break that down for my viewers. What does that really mean?
Means that if there is any encumbrance, means if
so
there is a charge on the property, if a lender has a charge.
There's no other claim on this property.
No other claim on this property. So he will have to declare an encumbrance if there is any, and 70% will be used for cost of construction as well as cost of land. The only hitch I see is that it can only be used on proportionate completion of the project. Now project, does it mean completion of construction of the project, or it will also be phased manner land amount?
Sudeep, if I may clarify, there is a portion of the bill that actually specifies at what point can the money be withdrawn from that escrow account, which actually has a list of certificates that have to come in from architects. And the architect certificate on the level of construction. I want to explain this to our viewers. What this means is there will be an escrow account, which is a bank account, which will have to be set up for each project. Now, when a developer begins to sell homes in a particular building, he has to put that 70% of the money that comes in from that sale into that bank account, and that money can only be used to build the building in question. It cannot be diverted to anything else. It can't be used to pay salaries. It can't be used to service debt or to pay interest. It has to be used for construction, and it can be withdrawn only when the construction reaches certain layers of completion and those certificates are put in. That's when that money can be withdrawn. Ashish Roheja, have you done a calculation of how all of these new things, whether that's the 5-year warranty or the escrow account, or any of the other details that are going to be added through this regulation, what will that do in terms of your feasibility study on your buildings? How much will it increase the price or the cost at your end?
To preamble it, to continue on the same thing, I'll just preamble it by saying, as I said, insurance premium, but insurance premium is also indirect. Today, if broadly we say there are two types of developers, the guys who are already transparent, say type A, and guys who delay by 4 years, 3 years, type B. There is a price difference already built in. The reason the type A developer charges 20% more is because he's already doing 60% or 40% of what RERA asks us to do. Only thing, it wasn't regulated, it was self-regulated. But many of these B-type developers came with schemes, attractive prices. There's something called caveat emptor, buyer beware. We've lost so many clients to attractive prices, pre-launches, etc., etc. We've not done a pre-launch. We do only after approvals. We actually put 50% of the money self-regulated in escrow ourselves with our own bank, be it HDFC or LIC. So the impact on cost for those who are already following it may be less, but the impact on those who are doing not following will be more. So it's very difficult to put a back of the envelope, but it could be as low as 5 to 7% for someone who's already following most of the preambles. We started being complying with RERA already 2-3 years ago, when the idea first came out. And it could go as high as 25%, especially mostly because of the direct costs and more so because the indirect cost is 70% escrow. But what I'm trying to emphasize here is that this was already available to customers. Had they not been attracted by schemes and newcomer developers and gone to unbranded developers and landed up in the situation they're in, they wouldn't have been, this regulator wouldn't have been so draconian, so difficult, which we are glad to comply with, because in a way it will take away our competition in the long run, and only clean guys and institutional corporate developers will be there, which there will be a cost increase because of cost, but there will be a secondary cost increase because of reduced supply.
Right. You know, Anuj, we've had several conversations.
Our cost of doing business, our volumes will go down, so automatically that impact will be much more than the direct cost. Because I can build much less, that will be a much larger cost which will have to pass on to the customer.
Alright, so there will
So
be
it could go high as 20-25%.
there will be an added cost up to 20-25%, and Anuj, there will also be a certain amount of consolidation that will happen in the industry, which means that developers who are unable to comply will have to slowly exit the industry, leaving only those, like Ashish said, who are either already complying or as close to compliance as possible. That might also have an impact on supply.
Absolutely, Faye. And just before we dig into that, and this is a very important point that you say on consolidation of the developers, my understanding was that on the 70%, you could actually pay the interest cost.
Okay.
So I'm not so sure on that but it's an interesting point because my understanding was that 70% would allow you to pay the interest cost on the debt. It will certainly have consolidation, and I'm telling you, whether it's Rohit or Ashish, they'll be delighted with that consolidation, because there are so many fly-by-night operators that have got into real estate development that they have marred the name of the sector itself.
Yes.
And that needs to get clean. Nowhere, Faye, in any of these markets, whether it is Singapore, Europe, Australia, you have hundreds of thousands of developers who are undertaking development without any regulation. I mean, look at many of these places in North India where they're taking away the money, not a brick being put, and all the money is going into their
But that's a fundamental problem. There's no definition of a developer right now in our market. Anybody can become a developer.
Which is where, Ashish is saying is, he was losing those clients because people were getting attracted and getting into, some of these fly-by-night operators. I think they are definitely going to go away in my...
Anuj, that also brings up another thing. And while I believe the regulator doesn't completely absolve the home buyer, there's a certain amount of homework that needs to be done on the side of the customer as well. While that comes down considerably and the information is more readily available, it doesn't completely absolve
And
us.
it will be in any product, Faye, in any product. When you're going to go out and buy an insurance, it will be in there. When you go out and buy a phone, it will be there. When you go out and buy a car, it will be there.
I really do wish that customers did as much research about their insurance policies and their loans as they do about cars. Rohit, you wanted to add something to
I was just going to say one more thing.
Faye.
Something. Rohit, go ahead.
So, Faye, look, what Anuj said is right, and even what you said. The customer, RERA, no RERA, I don't believe that just because you have a law in place that the customer suddenly can, go to sleep and not do any due diligence. I think that's a complete wrong way of looking at it. RERA only takes care of the legal aspect. Customers must continue to look at the intent of the developer. Intent does not come out through RERA. Maharashtra has had the MOFA for the last 50 years. In spite of that, people still have problems. So to expect people, so I think customers have to continue to be vigilant. They have to continue to do their due diligence and homework. And if they expect that because a new law came out, everything is going to be hunky-dory and wonderful for them tomorrow, I think this problem is going to continue and carry on. So customers have to act in their own best interest and continue to take more interest in their home purchase decision. Why do they go to fly-by-night operators in the first place?
That is true. I second that, of course. I mean, I do realize for a lot of customers watching at home, the information was not readily available until now. But when the regulator does come in, it'll all be available on one website. All of the permissions, the background of the developer, the background of the promoter, everything you need to know will be available in one place. Then there'll be no excuse for doing that, for not doing that homework. Anuj, what you said about the escrow account, the bill does say it will need to be used to cover the cost of the project. Now, we'll have to find out from the definition of cost of
understanding is
project.
that the cost of the project should
Include the
financing
interest,
cost.
yeah, should include the financing cost as well. Yes, you were
The
saying.
thing is, Faye, the other point, and it may be a little bit contradictory to what Ashish said earlier. Ashish said is that the volumes will go down. I completely agree that the volumes will go down, but my guess is that it is in that interim phase that the volumes will go down. I think when you're going to be on the other side, when you come out, because it will become an institutional play, there's going to be a lot of capital that will come in. There will be a number of institutional corporates who are going to get into this game. You may see the volumes actually go up in 3 years' time on the other side of all this, once the confusion and the grayness and the fuzziness of RERA is all settled down, you may actually see on the other side a lot more improved volumes because it became an institutional play, just like when you look at the telephone. Thing before the try and after the try, before SEBI, after SEBI, before the IRDA, after the IRDA. So I am hoping that once it all settles, you actually see a lot more volumes by perhaps a fewer players, but a lot more depth in the market.
Rohit?
See, I think Anuj makes a really interesting point, but I think that will really pan out if the developer, if the regulator and the authorities in every state actually follow what the Act says, that they're not there as it's not purely from a customer point of view, it's to actually improve the overall real estate sector. I think if the authorities play that role, and if you refer to some of the clauses in the Act, the authorities actually expected, and it says shall recommend to the state improvement for the entire sector. And I think if those kind of things are indeed done by the regulator, certainly there will be improvement. So I think that where the authorities actually play the part that is expected, we can expect positive things. Where they step in and only try and act as somebody to control developers and to only look at it pro-consumer and not as a regulator for the entire industry to improve the industry, we won't see that happen. So that's just the only caveat which I'd like to add to what Anuj said.
No, Ashish, I know you were going to say something, and I want you to also respond to this. This is clause 32 of the bill that says the authority should be also invested in the growth of the industry, but it's a very loosely worded clause. It says that the authority may make suggestions to the government to sort of put up a redressal mechanism for local bodies who hand out permissions, may make a suggestion to rate developers. It's not as strongly worded as the rest of the bill that puts the consumer in focus. While it's a good thing, do you believe that it should have given the regulator more teeth when it comes to local permissions?
I think in fact that was my interruption, was entirely about that. As I was going to agree with Anuj completely. Yes, there will be a short-term downturn in volume, but long-term there will be more clarity and there will be increase in volume subject. If institution developers and corporate developers will come in, subject to the government agencies and local authorities being accountable. Yes, RERA has been given the regulatory authority to make them accountable, but you think one department of the government will listen to the other? They work their own ways. Despite all the ease of business, whichever institution comes in, this will have to navigate 100 different, completely complex approval mechanisms, which RERA, with all its best intentions, will have a hard time changing the ground reality and the current norm. Changing that norm will take much more than 3 years. So the volumes will pick up, A, when RERA gets streamlined, and B, when the local authorities also change their way of working, which hopefully with this clause 32 may have some impact. We have seen the other regulators have definitely taken authority in their own hands, and hopefully state to state some will, but they'll differ from state to state how much they push the local authorities and the incumbent planning authorities to take cognizance and be as efficient and as accountable. That will take a little longer than 3 years.
Of course, Anuj, all of the regulators that you named, and this has been a history in this country, there's obviously been an accusation of what they call policy volatility, where there's a seesawing of, back back and forth of regulation. There's a learning curve. So I'm assuming it would be fair to assume that some of that will also happen with this regulator. But before we get into that, Rajneesh Ahuja is on the phone line from Gurgaon with a question for us. Rajneesh, go ahead. Rajneesh, can you hear me? Go ahead. What's your question?
My question is, with the current RERA Act passed in the Parliament, does it cover the commercial property also?
Yes, it
or
does.
is it only for the residential flats?
All right.
If yes, then
Yes.
what? It is for the present properties also, already invested properties also, or for the future properties?
Do you want to answer that? Obviously, Sudeep, if it holds the same rules, then anything, even commercial or retail under construction, without occupation certificate, right? Is that how it works?
Yes, correct.
As long as the plot is greater than 500 square meters.
Okay. I want to ask you this. Rajneesh, have you had a problem so far with commercial property? Are you an investor in commercial property?
Yes, because I am already invested in the commercial property, and for the last few years, and the builder is not building the property. He's a defaulter in the commercial property also.
Okay.
And he had promised he was giving assured returns previously. Now he has stopped giving assured returns also. So every time I listen to the program, I get to know about the residential flats only, not about the commercial property. Nobody highlights the commercial property.
Okay. Has this property been delivered to you, or is it still under construction?
It is not. It is under construction, and the builder is not making it, not giving the assured return also.
Right. Anuj, you smiled at assured returns. There's no such thing, Rajesh, as assured returns in the real estate industry. All the gentlemen in the panel will tell you that. But it will be regulated by the regulator, wouldn't it?
Yes, absolutely. It will be regulated by the regulator. When in 2009, the UPA government had put together the first format of the real estate regulation bill, commercial was not included in that, and neither were brokers included in that. In 2014-15, when you had the select committee and the standing committee that was formed, feedback was given, and that's how the commercial project as well as the brokers are now regulated.
Rohit Gera, you wanted to add to that?
No, I completely agree. I think in this case, certainly the project would be covered under RERA. It covers commercial, it covers under construction. Just one small correction, Faye. I think, if I'm not mistaken, the projects where the RERA has a different definition for completion certificate and occupancy certificate. Okay. And what it says is where the completion certificate has been issued, those projects will not need to register.
Okay.
So completion certificate issued but no OC issued will not be covered under, will not need to register. So there's just a difference in that.
All right, completion certificate and not occupation certificate. Rajneesh, yes, the building that you've invested in will be regulated by the new regulator. I'm not so sure about the assured return, so it depends on whether or not you have a registered contract to that effect. Do you?
Yes. Yeah, I have the registered contract. I have the registered contract with the builder. But the question is, the law is very silent on the commercial properties regarding this.
No, the law is not silent on commercial at all. Everything that's said in the bill about residential property will also apply to commercial property to the same effect. So I don't think it's silent about commercial property and about investors like yourself, Rajesh.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Our phone lines are still open if you'd like to call us and ask us a question. There's another really big change that will happen when the regulator comes in, and that is the appellate tribunal. Sudeep, I want to bring you in here. Of course, right now, if I have a problem, and there are so many investors and home buyers who have a problem, whether like the person we just, like Judge Rajneesh, who we just spoke to, where they've invested money and they haven't gotten delivery of those homes. Their options right now are consumer court, and consumer court takes a minimum of 4, sometimes 5 years to work through a case. Now, these regulators in every state will come with an appellate tribunal, which is a specific court that will only hear cases linked to real estate between developer and customer. And I don't know how this is going to work, but there is a promise that redressals will happen in 60 days or less. Do you believe that's that's something that can be executed?
Well, I guess there will be an attempt definitely to follow the rule of law, and it will all depend upon the number of cases and the number of judges that is being appointed in those forums. And once that is,
because we do know that there's enough trouble right now staffing the benches of the consumer court and of other smaller courts. So this is one more court that needs to be staffed.
Yeah.
Yes, that is true, but I guess, but it will still move fast. It depends from person to person, from judge to judge, and it will. But once once the process starts, there will be certain mechanical matters. Particularly, there is an adjudicating officer who will determine the compensation and things like that. So everything will not be determined by the court. There will be expert bodies who will determine, and he may have to pass mechanically. Certain orders will be really regular and mechanical orders. So then things will be much easier there.
Ashish Raheja, and I know that this is the problem that the industry is facing, where one PIL against a particular construction can call for a stay on construction, and then everything comes to a grinding halt. If we have a specific court that's hopefully in a position to hear cases a lot faster, will that aspect of delay also come down? We might not see as many delays caused by PILs and stays in construction?
I think Sudeep probably is better to answer that, because this will be consumer litigation against that. It will be a whole different avenue of, right now PILs are, thank you Sudeep.
So the other question. You see, basically, there are various ways by which registration can be affected. Registration of the developer. It can be revoked, it can be suspended, it can lapse. Now, in case there is if the developer is unable to complete the project within the promised period, it will again have to go back to the authority, and the authority will determine whether it can grant an extension. Now, the force majeure definition, it can actually grant an extension for force majeure or for any other reason, subject to a period of 1 year.
Act of God, where it's a flood or an earthquake, and that's the reason why he has not been able to complete the construction.
Yes, in this case, the force majeure definition is very, very limited. And so this is, as I said, it according to my reading, it is two parts. One is the force majeure part, and the other part is for reasons beyond the control. And in that case, it can only extend for 1 year, and in other cases, it can extend possibly for the period of the force majeure. That is the way it will work, But to answer your question on PIL, I don't think PIL would be a public interest litigation for an environment or other issues. The PIL will not be an issue between a allottee and the promoter.
So it won't be heard in this court?
It will not be heard in this court.
But there is a portion of the bill that allows the appellate tribunal to pull cases that are actually being heard in other courts on that same level in this court if it believes it affects the rights of other consumers. That's a possibility.
Yes, then there is a possibility, but it cannot assume jurisdiction of a high court.
Okay.
Right.
All right. So obviously there are a lot of things to look at very carefully.
To add to that, right now there are PILs in High Court.
Go ahead, Ashish.
The High Court has jurisdiction on PILs, so it's unlikely a tribunal can pull authority as Sudeep from the higher court. In fact, we'll have a second round of PILs, indirect PILs, which will actually cause delay. One is the traditional environment and the approval PILs we're facing in the High Court, which are most of them are negative or blackmail artists. But now with the, as I said, customers, most are good guys, but there are a few bad apples who might use this just to blackmail the developer. So we'll have a second avenue of indirect PILs in the tribunal. Hopefully not, but we are anticipating that.
Right. Sudeep also answered this question before we go into break. Now, there was obviously, when the bill was being written and the draft was being written, and it's still a case, the industry turned around and said, hey, you can't just regulate us, you also need to regulate the local bodies that give us the permissions, because delays in those permissions cause delays in buildings. So let's assume there is a delayed building or there is a delayed project. Those consumers approach the appellate tribunal. The appellate tribunal then summons the developer. The developer says, hey, you know what, I wasn't given my permission. So in that case, will the appellate tribunal have the authority then to summon the local body?
To answer your question, first question is the bunch of approvals that is required for commencement of the project will have to be taken even before the developer registers the project. So there may be other approvals like the occupation certificate or the completion certificate that will come closer to the end of the they will come much closer to the end of the project. Now you see, when the authority comes into play, it will definitely look at realistic ground realities, and obviously if it needs to pull up, it will pull up, and it will direct authorities to grant approval fast if there is a requirement.
Rohit Gera, indirectly, will that then regulate the local authorities?
So, Faye, I think the big concern from the developer perspective is Now you've got a ticking clock. You've given your date to the customer. As you get closer to the date, you apply, let's say, for an OC to a local authority, and it's some guy down the line. Okay, it's not necessarily everybody, but there's one guy down the line. All he needs to do is go home that night, get onto the website, see what your committed date is, and then ask his price. And he says, look, I understand that you have to pay 100, 200, 300 customers at whatever interest rate is committed because you're coming close to your date. This is my fee which you have to either pay me. And we've seen that happen as a result of some of the rules that they brought in even in Pune. We've seen this happen, and this is clearly a serious cause for concern that the local authorities are not covered. They just get a free hand, and one more, we're at gunpoint because of one more rule. That is a serious cause for concern as far as the developer segment is concerned.
Ashish Raheja, one more window, one more palm to grease, one more opportunity for extortion.
Extortion, as I said, from both vested interests from consumer groups, vested interests in local authorities, vested interests in politicians. Now people know not only are they holding up the project and our receivables, but potentially by holding up our completion, they can actually get us de-licensed, and further this prosecution, it's not a gun to our head, it's a bazooka to our head.
Right, it's a bazooka to the head of the developer. We're going to take a quick break, but we'll come back and talk about whether or not you should wait until the regulator comes in before you buy a home. That's on the other side. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back. You're watching the Urban Debate on Magicbricks, now India's first property channel. Thank you for staying with us. It's a very interesting conversation about the real estate regulator that will change the way you and I buy homes. It will also change the way homes are built and sold in this country. Anuj Puri joins me on this panel with Sudeep Malik, Ashish Raheja and Rohit Gera. Gentlemen, thank you for staying with us. Here's the question, the million-dollar question. Anuj Puri, do I wait until the regulator comes in, which you said will take 15-18 months in each state, because every state will have to set up a regulator. That regulator will have to have at least 3 members, and there's a specification of what their qualification has to be, and we'll also have to have a court which is staffed with judges, and there's a specification of their qualification as well. How long will that take, and does it make sense for me to wait?
So, Faye, I think the Act says that within 12 months, they have to set up a regulator, and as I said, there is going to be some fuzziness post that, and that fuzziness could be.
Well, there are some states that will be faster off the.
Yeah, absolutely. Some will be quicker, but I'm saying 12 months is the outer limit, so you can't go really beyond that. Your question is, should a buyer buy today, or should he wait until the Act is in force? My response to that is, there are great quality developers who are very financially disciplined today. You feel free to go out and buy their projects.
Okay, so here's my question. How do I tell? Because it's not about which is the biggest brand, it's not about which is the largest developer, not anymore. There are cases we know for sure. How do I tell who these great developers are with solid financial, fiscal, responsibility?
That's a very good point. And for that, you'll have to do a little bit of homework. You'll have to do a homework not only on the developer, but also you'll have to do a homework on the project itself, because you need to see that all the approvals are in place before the project is getting launched. The financial closure of the project has been done. The developer in the past has delivered the project on time, and what's the financial health of the developer. Many of these answers, you'll be able to get it from the banker who's going to be funding this project.
The banker who will give me a home loan to buy in that project?
And the banker who's funded the developer.
How do I find out that banker?
So you can ask the developer.
Okay.
Has there been a financial closure on the project? Because I'm saying there's no point really waiting until the developer until the regulator comes in and until the fuzziness goes away.
And the prices go up.
You're talking 24 months from today. Right. And unlikely that the prices will continue to remain at this level 24 months from today. So I would say is be careful, and it's a very valid point that you need to be careful, you need to do more homework, you need to be a little bit more responsible.
So if I'm willing to do the extra homework, then it makes sense to go ahead and do it now.
Certainly.
If I'm lazy and I don't want to do the homework, then I should wait for the regulator.
I think that's a very good summary.
If you're going to be lazy and not do your homework, just never buy a home.
Alright, just never buy a home. If you're going to be lazy and not do your homework, never buy a home. Anuj, is there a window between now and when the regulator comes in a year from now, when prices will come down even further because of the pressure on the system?
I dare say, Faye, that the prices are going to come down further.
You said this a year ago, and the prices came down after that.
It hasn't really.
It has. I'll show you numbers. NCR has corrected drastically for whatever's under construction. We know the numbers. The prices have come down.
If it had to come down, and look at Mumbai, Pune, Bangalore, and NCR, it is true, but NCR is also a very large market, and it's difficult to say which part of NCR the prices have come down.
I can tell you.
The prices had to come down, they would have come down by now. There is enough stress on the developer community, and those where the prices had to come down, they have come down to the level where it is. You're not going to see a 25-30% correction in the market from where we are today.
Okay. A 10% correction plus 10% inflation is effectively a 20% correction.
What 10% inflation is upwards and 10%
correction downwards. Effectively becomes a 20% inflation. Rohit Gera, I know you want to jump in on this about where the opportunities are to buy as a home buyer. Where are they?
So Faye, I think certainly if you're looking to buy a home today, the customer must go out and look at a reputed developer. You asked some very pertinent questions. I think you need to look at developer track record. Spend the time, take the effort. You're going to pay EMIs for the next 20 years. Right. Spend 2 weeks. Go and talk to 3 customers in one past project at the very least. Visit the same project at an interval of 2 weeks and judge for yourself. If a customer looks at 5 different projects, you can tell the work that's going on a site. A lay person with no engineering experience can tell if a site is active or not. If the site is active, and the developer has a track record from the past and is currently constructing in this market, I may say that you don't have any cause to worry with a reputed developer. If there is no construction going on, if the guy is giving it to you for free and he's underwriting that you're getting no liabilities with it, then think about taking that property for free, right? So please, go out there and do your homework. If you're thinking of buying from somebody whose track record is even slightly dubious, okay, or you're unsure about his track record, then you have to wait for the Real Estate Regulatory Act.
Right.
But if you're buying from somebody reputed, go out and buy it, it's fine.
Also this is the thing, there's nobody regulating communication from developers right now in this market. So all of the brochures that you see, the hoardings that you see, the artist impressions that you see, there is no regulation at this point making sure that what you see is finally what you get, which is why reputation is so important in the market right now before the regulator. Rajiv Saxena is on the phone line from Mumbai with a question for us. Rajiv, go ahead.
Hi, Mr. Puri. I'm Rajiv Saxena from Mohili Meadows Welfare Association.
Okay.
I'm a vice chairman of the association. Now, we are actually a home buyer association, and we are fighting towards the affected people of various projects. Now, what happened? We have a project here in Mohili Meadows, and it's developed by Mr. Anand Kadam.
Okay.
He's a builder. Now, he has sold property to many people, and since last 4 or 5 years, the possession has not been handed over. In many cases, in fact, the construction has not started. Now we understand this new bill which has come up is going to be effective prospective. But what about the people who have already invested money in the property prior to this bill? So how this particular real estate bill is going to help us to get some relief on such issues?
Obviously, if it's not complete yet, then it comes under the developer, right?
It comes under the Act.
Yes.
And maybe the authority will take over possession and ask and hand it over to your association to complete construction. And
that's the interesting thing, Sudeep. If the authority takes over the building, the project, and hands it over, who is going to complete that construction? Will they be in a position to complete construction?
that is why the mechanism of 70% is there. The 70% money would be there, which would be used for completing construction. Now, it leads to
what about the expertise of knowing how to build something that doesn't
obviously they will be appointing other contractors, building contractors.
And there is an option, Faye, that the regulator can either appoint another developer to take over that project, or as Sudeep said, can go back to the society and says, here's your 70% which was kept in the escrow, the amount, and please go ahead and develop it on your own. I think the trouble in this case, sorry Sudeep, is that they won't have 70% in there, because in this case, the developer is actually taking away the money.
Correct.
And if he gives back, the regulator gives back to the society, the trouble is society members are going to say, well, we paid all the money, now who's going to actually complete it?
Yes. So what would
there is
you
another
recommend
challenge
he
that-
does for this particular call? I want to address the problem. Sudeep, what would you recommend he does?
Yes,
Consumer court?
as of today, consumer court, and yes, and he will have to pursue his remedy under civil courts, and maybe initiate criminal proceedings if it calls for. If he has sold to many numerous people and the same property, then it is
It's cheating. It's Article 420 is cheating. You have two choices. You can either file a FIR and pursue criminal proceedings, or approach the consumer court. Ashish Reja, there's this other very interesting angle that will come up when the regulator comes in, and that is a list of violators which will be available on the website. So for our viewers watching at home, once the regulator comes in, every regulator will have a website which will detail all of the things we just talked about that every developer will have to declare. Also, developers who violate the rules will be on a special list that you can look at. So separating the good from the bad, Ashish, will become that much easier. I'm not sure if Ashish heard me.
Sorry about that.
Yes, so my question was, when that list does come in, separating the good from the bad will become that much easier for the industry, for investors,
Yeah.
and of course for buyers.
Yep.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes, yeah, of course it will be a very long list.
It will certainly be a very long list. Anuj, but this is the other thing. FDI in real estate was opened up, and we didn't see too much happen because, as you know better than anybody else, there was a lot of complaints about the lack of transparency in our market. All of that will change with the regulator coming in.
So, we've been speaking with the private equity guys. I can tell you they're delighted with the Real Estate Regulation Act.
I don't think it's too harsh.
Not really.
Okay.
I mean, they say that water is going to find its own course. Some of the states will dilute some of the provisions. I mean, clearly 70% in escrow in a city like Mumbai is a bit of a trouble. Because they're saying it is.
Will the state regulator have the ability to modify that to suit the state?
So my understanding is yes, they have the right.
But I don't know if.
No, the Act
Rohit?
says it's a minimum of 70%, they can only revise it upward.
Okay, so this Anuj?
Which is great for if you're a consumer, which is great if you are a home buyer, but I'm not so sure in a city like Mumbai that is going to be effective when your land cost as a total cost of the project is 70 or 80%, and then you're saying is that 70% of the proceeds that you're collecting have to be kept into an escrow when the land cost
Since we are talking about Mumbai, here is the city of Mumbai. Ashish, respond if you want. No development plan. Ban on all new permissions by the BMC because of the High Court. There was a High Court order that prevents now the BMC from giving any new permissions for any new buildings other than redevelopment. And now a regulator which you're saying will affect the market of Mumbai the harshest. What's going to happen to Mumbai in the next 1 year, Anuj?
So it is true that there is going to be a problem on the supply, the new DCR rule, the court's order on no development because of what's happening on the pollution side, and then a real estate regulator act coming in where the developers are wondering is should I go out and buy a parcel of land today without that clarity? So I think in the interim you're going to see all these three acts in its different identities will create a shortage in the supply, because the courts are saying you can't do any more construction, and on the other side you've got this flux of the new DCR that is not yet clarified, and then RERA. So clearly in a city like Bombay, I do see that these three, although independent directives, will have an impact on the supply.
Ashish Raheja, what is your visibility on the market of Mumbai going forward, given all of the things we just talked about?
What Anuj said, we've been counting on it. Exactly what Anuj said. The visibility is right now we are battling a battle between perception and reality.
Right.
The perception is there's oversupply, therefore prices remain suppressed. So that's the reality we have to face today. But probably in 6 months or 12 months, it will filter down that many of these projects who are in pre-launch phase will not get the approvals for any of the above three